Hello and welcome to another AIC video. Just to get some disclaimers out of the way, this laptop was sent to me by Lenovo for review, and at the end of the review I will be sending it back to them. I received no compensation for my review of this laptop, and the opinions herein are my own, for better or worse. And what we have here is a Lenovo Thinkpad T14 Gen 5. This laptop was released with a bit of fanfare. Repairability is kind of a big deal right now, and so they worked with iFixit to bring back some of the repairability that was in previous ThinkPads, and so it is more repairable than the previous generation of Lenovo ThinkPad. I did do a previous video where I did a comparison to two other ThinkPads I personally own. My T25 or 25th anniversary, which is based on a T470, and then my T14 Gen 2. And honestly, while there are a few differences, they're really not huge between the repairability between the different models. I do know that like the 4th gen did really remove some of that repairability, but as far as the two that I have, there's not a huge difference. The T470 does have a swappable external battery, but it does have that internal second battery. One of the big knocks against the P14S that I have is it does have one soldered RAM configuration. It does have an available slot to upgrade, but the backs are all removable with captured screws. None have soldered storage. The fans and heat sinks are easily cleaned and repasted, as well as the keyboards are easily replaced. The two things I have against the Gen 5 are the two things I've actually had or wanted to fix or replace on previous laptops, and they're not individual components that you can replace. The number one thing being the charging port back here. I know there are two USB ports and they're both able to be used for charging, but they are soldered to the main system board. USB-C ports are pretty decently robust compared to other USB ports. However, they are not nearly the same as the old square plugs that you got with previous ThinkPads, and so being soldered to the system board means that if you damage your charging port at all, you will have to replace the entire system board or have a custom repair job to desolder that port. On my T25, it is literally just a port that can be unscrewed and unplugged and replaced for a couple of bucks. They're really inexpensive to replace. The other thing is the Wi-Fi. Wi-Fi has seen a ton of upgrades and improvements over the last few years, and on both the P14S and on this laptop, the T14 Gen 5, they are soldered to the system board. So if you want to have some of those more modern features with Wi-Fi, now this does have the latest generation as of today. However, that does seem to be changing very quickly. It means that you'll be using an external device for the increased performance of newer Wi-Fi versions. All in all, they just really haven't reinvented the wheel with this laptop. There's some subtle changes, but nothing major that I would say puts it anywhere near what Framework does. There's a few changes I would definitely make to make it in the category above what they were previously, and as I mentioned, the Wi-Fi and being soldered and the USB port not being on its own daughter card or something that's easily replaceable for a couple of bucks is really something that they need to do to put this in that repairability category that it needs to be in. Repairability aside, what do I think of this laptop? First of all, it is obviously not the black plastic that we all know and love of traditional ThinkPads. It is this silver color. They do call it just gray. It is aluminum top and plastic bottom, and I like its design, but I do feel a bit sacrilegious in using a ThinkPad in any other color other than black. A couple things I like about it is it is not a fingerprint magnet, unlike previous ThinkPads like my T14, where I have, the day I bought it, I also bought a vinyl skin to cover it, because my other laptops, you can see just how much my fingers have imprinted themselves permanently into the coating of the laptop. So this will stay looking nicer a lot longer. I don't know if the black has the same coating as previous models, or if it's like this where it is just a metal case and so it does not attract fingers. I don't have a black one obviously to look at, but the silver one I would be tempted to go with simply because of the lack of marring that my poor greasy digits do to it. Continue on the looks. The camera bump doesn't bother me. I understand its necessity due to the 16:10 aspect ratio screen and not wanting to make the laptop any bigger. However, it would be nice if you could use that to one finger open the laptop, which really isn't doable. You honestly need two hands to do that. So it'd be nice if you could do that. However, the stiff hinges do mean that the screen has very little wobble, almost no wobble or flex at all when typing. This whole table is very loosey-goosey, so it seems like it's wobbling more than it is, but it does mean that the screen is very secure when using it. I do appreciate the upward-facing speakers that are here on either side of the keyboard. That means that if you're like me and you use a desk mat, your speakers are not muffled. A lot of times when they're downward-facing and you're using some sort of soft material on your desk, or if it's sitting on your lap, your sound is shot directly into that softer material, and it does kill the sound a little bit. They're not the best speakers on a laptop I've seen, but they're also not terrible. They're very mid-range, not a lot of bass, not a lot of top end, but they're clear enough, especially if you're doing like voice calls, things like that. Pretty decent for that option. As far as ports goes, they're there. As I showed previously, on this side we have our two USB-C ports. They are both Thunderbolt 4. You have two USB Type A ports, one on this side, one on the other. They are 3.1 Gen 1, or excuse me, 3.2 Gen 1, and an HDMI port, which is HDMI 2.1. On this side, you get your other USB port and your Ethernet port. I'd really like to see this Ethernet port, instead of being gigabit, be 2.5 gig. I think people who care about Ethernet are really going to want to start seeing these be 2.5 gig here in the near to distant future. I personally am going to be upgrading my whole home network to 2.5 here in the next few months, hopefully, as I buy more components that are compatible with it. There is a slot here that is not on my laptop. The blank is there, but that's for your SIM card, and then your smart card reader there on the right as well. Wireless connectivity on this laptop, we do have Wi-Fi 7 and Bluetooth 5.3. The one port I feel like I'm kind of missing is an SD card reader. I used one on my X270 just yesterday to read an SD card that I found laying around, so I didn't have to put it into a USB reader that plugs in, or have it in a camera plugs in. So it's just one of those things that I do use that still periodically, so for me, but I could see people also not really using that, because for how often you use it, it's really not that big a deal to use an SD card reader, but it'd be a nice one for me. One small concern I have with the laptop is the heat vents. If we go ahead and turn this around, do it with the screen open so you can see, you have the vents here for heat, but if you close it, you also have a little bit of venting out. I had an Asus recently that all the heat dumped into the bottom of the screen. It was a gaming laptop, so it was a lot of heat, and it was very high heat. And so some people were having problems with the bottom of the screen bezel actually warping and causing issues with the display. A lot of laptops are going to this system where they dump the heat out the back towards the screen. On something like this, I tested the temperatures, and they really only got up to about, with my cheap Amazon heat gun, about 100 to 109 degrees coming out of there. Best I could figure with that little heat gun. I don't think those temperatures are hot enough to do any damage to the laptop if that's an accurate reading, and very similar to my other ThinkPads as far as their exhaust port temperatures. So Not excessive heat, not too much, but it is something that I'm concerned about simply because I had a previous laptop that had a similar design, and it was a problem with that system. So I might have some um, fear from that that is completely unfounded. The nice thing about the heat going straight out back though is whether you're a righty or a lefty, you do not have heat dumping into your hands. That is a problem on my other laptops where if you're using an external mouse, um, on my P14S, it does dump out the heat on the right hand side, and so your hand does get a bit cooked uh, when using it. As far as heat through the system, it only barely got warm up here when doing synthetic benchmarks in everyday testing. Almost no heat in the keyboard. Also, the fans are dead silent at anything other than when I was doing gaming test and my synthetic benchmarks. So if you're not pushing this hard, you should almost never hear the fans turn on. Very quiet machine, which I really like. All right, so one major change, obviously, for this generation of laptop is the keyboard. So a couple things that you'll notice right off is they did go ahead and change the function and control keys. You can see function, control, function, and control, which you can't see on this one, but they have control and function. That's a minor change. I know a lot of people in modern age kind of want that. To me, neither here nor there. I use enough laptops that I'm used to switching back and forth. You can switch these back in the BIOS. That setting is available for you. The other change that you'll see here is the size and shape of the keys. You have a little bit more of a concave texture to the older P14S Gen 2, where these are much more flat. And obviously they are not the 7-row keyboard of my 25th anniversary. The thing that I think is kind of funny is I grabbed a tape measure here. Height wise, we're looking, was that 4 3/4 of an inch? 4 3/4 of an inch. And this one obviously is a little bit taller at 5 inches, but that's not a huge increase in size. We go from side to side. We have just not quite 11.5 inches. A little bit narrower at 11.25 inches. And about that 11, not quite 11.5 inches. So they're all real close in size. The T14 Gen 5 is also actually thicker than the other two laptops. It is slightly narrower from side to side. It's about 3/4 of an inch narrower than this, about 1/3 of an inch narrower than this ish. So it is slightly narrower. So I understand why they would want to shrink the keyboard that direction. But I think anybody who has owned a ThinkPad in the past would rather have the laptop be slightly wider and fit a keyboard they prefer in there. This isn't a bad keyboard per se, but it is a different keyboard. It didn't take me much to get up to my normal typical typing speed on it. However, I shouldn't have to with a ThinkPad. I wish that Lenovo would bring back, and I know this isn't necessarily the most popular opinion, but bring back the 7-row. Seriously, you could modify it just enough to fit in this laptop. You have the room for it. Just do it. This is what your namesake is having one of the best keyboards in the world on a laptop. And while this isn't bad, and probably still one of the best on a new laptop, it's not because the other ones are good. It's because everybody else's keyboards are getting worse. And so don't follow that trend, Lenovo. Keep the keyboards amazing. This one's good. It's not great. This one's better, and this one's better. It just is. As far as touchpad goes, I think it's the perfect size. When I go to type, my palms rest right next to it without touching it. I've had a problem with some of these laptops that have the ginormous touchpad on there, which is almost too big, and your hand rests on half the stupid touchpad, and then it causes problems with it recognizing you doing stuff when you don't mean it to do stuff, things like that. So this is a right size trackpad. It's very accurate, very easy to use. Track point, if you've never used a track point before on a laptop, when you're doing productivity things, there's no replacement for it. It means your hands get to stay right where they're at. It reduces fatigue and wrist strain, and it increases your overall speed of using the laptop. All right, I hate talking battery life on laptops because um, it's really hard for me to have exactly the same test for every single laptop I do. And what your experience is versus what my experience is can be widely different just because of the way we use our laptops. But I've been using this for work. I remote into my work laptop from it, and I've been getting upwards of 8 to 9 hours out of it doing that. I do have the screen at full brightness, but I don't really have much running locally on the machine itself. Again, your mileage may vary. That is my pretty typical work case. I have a work laptop I have to use. It's a Dell. I hate it. And so I use every other system I can instead of it to work by remoting into it. So this laptop does that great, and battery life on it is stellar. I'm getting old. I'm in my 40s now, and so I do like that brightness as high as I can get it so I can actually see what I'm looking at. All right, so a gaming laptop, this is decidedly not. I don't know if you can see the FPS counter up in the upper left-hand corner, kind of small there. But I did play some different games on here, and first one was Pal World. On very low settings, I got 20 FPS when there was very little going on the screen. But once there was more than myself and a pal or two, it quickly dropped to single digits. Rocket League could hit 50 frames per second sometimes, but only on low settings and in training. Once I got into a match, frames dropped to the mid-30s with much action on the screen, and would even drop into the low 20s. Fall Guys could get me at least 40 to 50 frames per second. That was playable. I felt competitive, where with Rocket League I was at a severe disadvantage. Grand Theft Auto, which we're running a benchmark here, with everything set to normal, it struggled to give me 30 frames per second and would often dip into the 20s when actually playing. And so if you are thinking of buying this for gaming, unless you do very casual gaming, I would not. I would avoid. I either pick up one with the AMD processor, which has a much better internal graphics card, or I'd pick up one of the P series, like a P14, with a dedicated graphics. Even then, these are business class machines, not gaming laptops. So if you're going to be playing gaming, buy the right tool and buy a gaming laptop. So final thoughts on this system. I always come back to, would I spend my money on it? If this was given to me as a work machine, I'd be thrilled. As I said previously, I have a Dell machine right now that I honestly hate and cannot wait until I can replace it with something else. It's not a very good machine, and so this is a nice laptop. Like, don't get me wrong, it is a nice laptop. And I think for the masses, which is really who this is aimed for, it's perfectly acceptable for what it is. You have thin bezels, it looks good, it's not a fingerprint magnet, it'll look good in a meeting, it'll probably hold up to some pretty heavy use from an end user. Things that, for the most part, things that a repair depot at a company would care about are upgradable, swappable, changeable, whatever they need to be on here. As far as size goes, if I didn't have other ThinkPads to literally stack this up against, I wouldn't know there was a size difference on it, and I wish they took advantage of that. I think people wouldn't mind slightly more bezel, millimeter or 3, to have the older keyboards. That's just my opinion. If that's what it required to have the older keyboards, I don't know what they'd have to change to fit it in there. I understand why they do some of the things that they do, like having the soldered Wi-Fi card that's an assembly thing. It makes it a lot cheaper to assemble these laptops. You're removing an entire step and probably a human that you're having to pay to sit there and screw these in, and they can be assembled significantly faster in the factory. But again, would I spend my money on this? Probably not. And mainly because, not because of the keyboard or the performance, but I would want a dedicated graphics card. I do enough things like video editing on my laptops where having that dedicated graphics card makes a big difference for me personally. And so that's kind of the big thing for me is I wish that the Intel graphics on here, it does have Iris graphics. Iris. I think I said Irish, but it's Iris graphics. I was hoping they'd be a little bit better. AMD has been really handing it to Intel when it comes to those integrated graphics compared to the Intel chips. And so I really was hoping now that they have their gaming cards and things like that, Intel would really step up with the performance on the graphics card in this system. So I really feel like it doesn't get much better performance than like a 10th gen Core i7 processor, and this is the Core Ultra 7. So is that 3 generation newer for some of these games that we threw on here. I've done similar testing with Fall Guys and with Grand Theft Auto 5, things like that on other systems, and either got very similar or even possibly better performance with an older machine with a dedicated graphics. So that's just me with my personal opinion. Sometimes when I get these laptops and I have to send them back to the Lenovo, it is really hard to send them back. This one, I didn't, in my time with testing, I didn't get real attached to it. I'm not sad to be sending this one back. So I'm hoping to get a chance to get my hands on some other laptops from Lenovo soon. So I'll definitely follow up with those. If you have any questions, comments, go ahead and leave those down in the comment section down below. Thank you for watching. Hope you have an amazing day.